Hi, I'm going to present here in this video what I claim to be the proper way to play the opening melody or the main theme of the second movement of Mozart's piano sonata in F major, K332. Now, this is not the sort of claim that requires of a person that they either accept or reject it at face value, because I'm going to be backing it up. I'm going to be defending my stance with passages I've selected from Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach's book Versuch über die wahre Art das Klavier zu spielen. Plus, I have what I don't think is inaccurate to describe as never before seen instruction specific to that piece from Mozart himself on its proper performance. So that's breaking news, a world exclusive. Moreover, its implications are significant in terms of how this discovery will spill over into new perspectives on the proper performance of his other sonatas, and in terms of finding Mozart's true voice. Besides proving why my way of playing it is not just my way, but is in fact the correct way to play it, those arguments are also going to render the general consensus of how it is meant to be played entirely incorrect, by showing what makes it incorrect, and by showing the negative or damaging effects the incorrect way of playing it has on various aspects of the composition. So, even though it's not going to end up a question of either or, even though through the strength and irrefutability of my argument and my sources, it's going to be a case of right and wrong, of the true way to play it versus the bad way to play it, even though what I'm doing here is setting the record straight, you're still going to have all you need to be able to weigh it up next to any compelling in-depth defense the Roll of Honor is able to give as to why their version is correct, and make up your own mind. You have your independence as individuals. I say general consensus, but I think that's probably an understatement, because I don't think the classical music sector, as represented by the Roll of Honor, could agree more on how something is meant to be played than it does on this. In the appendix G. Henley Verlag provide with their edition of Mozart's piano sonatas, containing suggestions for performing the ornaments, G. Henley Verlag says the ornament from bar 1 is to be played so. There you see it. I selected G. Henley Verlag from the Roll of Honor, but I could have picked any of them, because no matter where you go, this is more or less exactly how you'll see it written or explained, how you'll hear it performed, and how you'll find it taught. In other words, I'm basically going up against everyone with this. And to bring it back to my opening statement, I have to say that this second movement theme is heavily influenced by its ornamentation, by those turns, or braces as I call them. The true character of the phrase is entirely dependent on the correct performance of its ornament or ornaments. So, addressing the proper way to play the ornament is synonymous with addressing the proper way to play the phrase. It is a pivotal part of the process. I don't think I'd be off in describing the ornament as the crux of the phrase. And with that I include all its variations and reiterations. Incidentally, for those who've been following my videos on the brace, what we are seeing here is a new variant of brace brought in with dotted notes that Bach did touch upon to a certain extent, but that he didn't specifically identify in this specific constellation or indicate in this specific way with small notes. So the topic of this video could potentially be included as an extension to that course on the brace. Perhaps this new variant of brace, indicated by small notes, was Mozart's innovation, and perhaps it could be called the Mozartian brace, although that probably isn't fair to Bach, who has his own brace that he didn't get named after him. Plus, that thought is entirely uninformed, and it could be that with it I'm shortchanging the true discoverer of that variant of brace. With its frequent use though, Mozart did make it his own. But regardless from whom it originates, it is an ornament that has been completely misunderstood. I consider that what Bach said in paragraph 1 from the chapter on ornaments in general, regarding the role of ornaments, to be particularly true or particularly apt in describing the full range of influence this brace has on Mozart's theme. Sie hängen die Noten zusammen. Sie beleben sie. Sie geben ihnen, wenn es nötig ist, einen besonderen Nachdruck und Gewicht. Sie machen sie gefällig und erwecken folglich eine besondere Aufmerksamkeit. Sie helfen ihren Inhalt erklären. The braces in Mozart's theme, when performed properly, do all that. When they are played incorrectly, they do none of it, and in some of the points, they do the opposite. So, G. Henley Verlag suggested to be played so. While the left hand is playing its 4 16th notes, or semiquavers, the main note, or principal note in the right hand, the D, comes in with the first left hand 16th note. Of the ornament, the note above, the note itself and the note below are played with the second left hand 16th note as a triplet. And the return of the note itself, the principal note, comes in with the third left hand 16th note, while the following E flat is played at the same time as the last left hand 16th note of the beat. When playing the brace correctly, according to the true way to play the piano, its first note doesn't come in until after the third left hand 16th note, after half of the beat has passed. So here comes what Bach calls the Wissenschaft, the knowledge or intelligence. Instead of its normal common sign, Mozart uses small notes to indicate the brace. Why the change? In bar 34 he uses the normal sign of the brace. So why adopt a new way of indicating it? Just for the heck of it or what? That question, which I'll be answering presently, is a question the Roll of Honour, as part of their defence, could address. You might already recall, if you've gone through the system like I have, you'll be able to recall what you've been told, how, your education. And you can think back to how was that addressed in the course of my education with the Roll of Honour. How did they address that? How did they explain that? What did they say when they pointed that out? Even though I'm certain, had this way of indicating a brace already existed at the time Bach wrote his Versuch, that we would have found its inclusion in his chapter. In paragraph 23 from the chapter on ornaments in general, he does have this to say about such ornaments, because generally the indicating of ornaments with small notes did exist. Alle der kleinen Nötchen angedeutete Manieren gehören zur folgenden Note. Folglich darf niemals der vorhergehenden etwas von ihrer Geltung abgebrochen werden, indem bloß die folgende so viel verliert, als die kleinen Nötchen betragen. Diese Anmerkung ist so viel nötiger, je mehr gemeiniglich hier wieder gefehlt wird. This is the knowledge or intelligence Mozart will have been drawing upon when deciding how he's going to indicate this new kind of brace. That's the answer, by the way. It's a new kind of brace, hence the new way of indicating it. So, according to Bach, the ornament in bar 1 belongs to the E flat and not to the D. You can see that G. Henley Verlag rips the ornament from the E flat and gives it to the D, where all the value is broken off from the D and none whatsoever from the E flat. With their bow or slur sign to top it off, you can see how the ornament has been completely isolated from the E flat. So, in other words, they abducted it and dragged it to the wrong side of the beat. Bach goes on to say, so, diese Anmerkung ist so viel nötiger, je mehr gemeiniglich hier wieder gefehlt wird, und je weniger ich habe verhindern können, dass zuweilen bei den gehäuften Zeichen der Fingersetzung, der Manieren und des Vortrags der Raum bei den Probestücken erfordert hat, dass einige kleine Nötchen von ihrer Hauptnote, wozu sie gehören, haben müssen abgerissen werden. So, with the limited space on the page of the score sometimes forcing Bach into having to separate the small notes from the principal note to which they belong, he says that in light of this detail becomes all the more important to remember. The small notes of the ornament belong to the E flat and not to the D. That's the significance or implication that comes with indicating it via small notes instead of using the standard sign. That's why Mozart changes the way of indicating, why it's new. It's not, it's founded, there's practical reasons for it. Bach says more in paragraph 24. Vermöge dieser Regel werden also statt der folgenden Hauptnote diese kleinen Nötchen zum Basse oder anderen Stimmen zugleich angeschlagen. Man schleift durch sie in die folgende Note hinein. Hier wieder wird gar sehr oft gefehlt, indem man auf eine raue Art in die Hauptnote hineinplumpt, nachdem noch vulgar dazu die mit den kleinen Noten vergesellschaftete Manieren ungeschickt an- und herausgebracht worden sind. When he talks about plopping into the principal note, Bach is referring to when such small noted ornaments are written in before a note that comes in at the start of the beat. He's specifically talking about them. It is still valid here though. In G. Henley Verlag's failure to observe any of this in their appendix, the one that comes with the sonata, with the suggestions for the ornaments in it, the weight the D gets as it lands in with the third left-hand 16th note, even though it is not located in the exact same place as the principal note Bach is referring to in those two paragraphs. So the weight the D gets as it lands in with the third left-hand 16th note, it does belong to the coarse or rough way of plopping into the main note. And I just have in brackets there, thanks to the Alberti bass, which I'll be getting to. So landing in with the third left-hand 16th note, it belongs to the coarse or rough or uncouth way of plopping into the main note. So, and the tiresome plod of the D prevents it from being able to slide into the E flat, which causes the E flat to have a similar plod of its own. The melody drags its feet. It traipses along with heavy footfalls. That can be compared to the way the D returns when the ornament hasn't been ripped from its following note. The melody is light on its feet. There is no plopping into the principal note. The space the last D of the brace takes up is just as much as is needed to coincide with the nature of the brace. Verbindet seine letzten Noten nicht geschwinde mit der folgenden, weil die ersten geschwinder sind als die letzte, und also vor der folgenden Note allezeit ein kleiner Zeitraum überbleiben muss. And besides plopping and other toilet talk, the unskillful introduction and execution of the ornament, in G. Henley Verlag's way of doing it, manifests itself in the ornament coming in too early and in it being too slow. A more one-to-one example of what Bach is talking about in that paragraph 23 can be heard in the Roll of Honour's performances of the second movement of Beethoven's Sonata Das Lebewohl. So that's Lay Adieu. And the second movement is Abwesenheit, its title. So separation, or, you know, being away. Absence. Well, I think the French one is la absence. You could listen to how Kissin plays those ornaments, for example. Or pick anyone you like to listen to. The more acclaimed and award-winning they are, though, the better, in terms of it proving Bach's point. What you'll be hearing is exactly what Bach is talking about. By ripping the ornaments, Beethoven indicates via small notes from their following note, which, by the way, are all situated at the start of the beat in this case. What you are hearing is the roll of honour plopping in a rough or coarse or uncouth way into the principal note after delivering an unskillful introduction and execution of the ornament. Their playing epitomizes that what Bach refers to as unskillful. The Roll of Honour would say it's Beethoven. Bach would disagree. He'd lay the blame firmly on the Roll of Honour. Now I can't put up, something says that, you know, copyright and all that, and I don't know how. I can't put up, you know, extracts from Kissin's performance or somebody else's from the Roll of Honor, and it would be sweet if I could, you know, so you could really get the comparison, but I can put up how they're meant to be performed. And so this is how they're meant to be performed. And you can compare those other performances to that if you want to understand where Bach is coming from and how valid what he's saying is. So there's a chance there to see in real terms exactly what Bach is talking about. And when you understand that what Kissin does and what the Roll of Honor do is not Beethoven, but is in fact they themselves. And when you understand that it's incorrect, and when you listen to, you know, my demonstration of it is not only a demonstration of the true way to play the piano, but it's a demonstration of the correct way to play those parts of that piece. You can hear what Beethoven actually had in mind or wants, and then you can see the Roll of Honor, what people will have accepted as being correct. You can see it with new eyes, and then see that if it wasn't you listening to it but Bach listening to it, he'd call that unskillful. And you can see it's, once you know it's wrong, it becomes obvious how unskillful it is. And you know, like with Kissin, that it's not a question of his ability, that he'd be able to play it like I play it in the phrase. So it's not his ability, it's about the mind being in the cage, about just an ignorance that has taken over, and him being victim to that. So it's a chance to see where Bach is coming from, and it's bringing Bach to life. So the unskillful introduction and execution of the small notes in bar 1 in G. Henle Verlaag's way of doing it manifests itself in the ornament coming in too early, and in it being, as a result, too slow. So that's the unskillful introduction and execution there as far as bar 1 of K332 of the second movement is concerned. To expand on this, I'll read the appendix to paragraph 24 from the chapter on the brace. wenn die letzte Note des Doppelschlages kurz abgestoßen werden soll. Wie kann man dieses andeuten? Entweder dadurch, dass man zum Punkt noch eine Pause hinschreibt, a, oder dass man neben dem Zeichen des Doppelschlages ein Strichelchen über 2 Punkte beisetzt, b. Obgleich diese neuen Schreibarten fremd aussehen, so sind sie doch nötig. Man kann nicht zu viel tun, um den rechten Vortrag anzudeuten. So, that bit of the appendix correlates in that Mozart is doing what he can to indicate the proper performance. Plus, for those paying particular attention, it'll explain why Mozart didn't use the double dot for the D. The double dot shortens the length the D is to be held. It doesn't shorten the length of the E flat. It shortens the length of the D. The remainder of this appendix contains another suggestion from Bach on what can be done to indicate the correct performance when there is a left-hand accompaniment like that in Mozart's Adagio. Although in the appendix, Bach doesn't address the case of a dotted rhythm. Wenn ein Doppelschlag nach einer etwas langsamen Note vorkommt, wozu entweder 2 oder mehrere Bassnoten angeschlagen werden, oder wozu statt der Noten auch Pausen gehören, a. So teilt man diese Note wegen mehrerer Deutlichkeit und hängt diese 2 Teile mit einem Bogen zusammen, damit sie nur einmal angeschlagen würde. Man sieht alsdann ganz deutlich, wenn der Doppelschlag eintreten soll, b. Außerdem könnte mancher Ungeübter mit dieser Manier zu zeitig zuplatzen und wäre alsdann genötigt, nicht zu viel Zeit leer zu lassen, sie, wieder die im 10. Paragraph gegebene Regel, zu langsam vorzutragen, welches eine schlechte Ausnahme verursacht. G. Henley Verlag, and with them the entire Roll of Honour, fall into that very same trap. They come in with the ornament too early, and that obliges them to go against the rule in paragraph 10, which is, da dieser Doppelschlag die allermeiste Zeit geschwinde gemacht wird, and play it too slowly, which is the bad luck Bach is talking about. What G. Henley Verlag is doing is what Bach says Ungeübter do, so novices, unpracticed, rookies. And it doesn't look good. Especially when the Ungeübter are the Roll of Honour, the champions of our time, the leading experts, the cream of the crop. Because that's what'll turn your champions into the laughingstock of future generations, and of Bach, Mozart and Beethoven. And when your champions become a laughingstock, then, by default, so do all who follow them. Also, in paragraph 19 from the chapter on ornaments in general, das Brillante, welches die Manier hervorbringen soll, muss also nicht dadurch gehindert werden, wenn zu viel Zeitraum von der Note übrig bleibt. In this case, there is too much time of the note left over, a full third of it, and it kills the kind of brilliance this ornament should be bringing to the fore. Here's paragraph 2 to go with the aforementioned paragraph 10. Weil die allermeiste Zeit hurtig ausgeführt wird. The writing it out in small notes was Mozart's solution to the problem of preventing Ungeübter from coming in with the brace too early and making the phrase look bad. Had Mozart followed Bach's advice, the score could have become too dense or too complicated, with the added implications of it being a dotted rhythm and with its frequent occurrence, where the clarity or legibility could suffer. So here's how it might have looked if Mozart had followed Bach's advice. So imagine such, tied notes and the figures coming up as often as the brace comes up in that movement. The overview where you can see the framework of the melody is a lot less immediate. It doesn't, it's constantly present when you look at it as it is. If Mozart had adopted Bach's advice, it would look less transparent. A lot of the manner in which ornaments and as well performance practices are indicated has to do with preserving an overview, with separating the trees from the wood, so to speak. How does Mozart indicate that the brace is to be introduced as late as possible, while still preserving the clarity of the line or the framework of the line? By writing it out in small notes and thus connecting them to the following E flat. The underlying structure in its simplest form remains visible, as opposed to indicating it the other way. What was Mozart thinking when he did that? He'll be thinking, if I indicate it using small notes, then people will know that any action that takes that ornament away from the following note is incorrect. That's what he'll be thinking, because he's looking for the best way to notate what he wants to ensure the proper performance of it. Both solutions to the problem, I'd say, are valid. If he didn't care, he'd have just used a normal sign of the brace. He wouldn't have come up with a new way of indicating it. So both solutions to the problem, I'd say, are valid. And while Mozart's solution might have been better for the clarity of the line under the circumstances, it definitely wasn't foolproof. Bach's solution, while looking more complicated, might have had, though, that foolproof element going for it. This is the new variant of brace. It is a brace that comes in later than it normally would when introduced after a dotted note. Here's how a brace after a dotted note would normally be introduced. Im dritten Falle entstehen zwei Punkte, zwischen welchen der Doppelschlag gemacht wird. C. Die Einteilung finden wir bei 2 in Noten ausgeschrieben und ist allezeit dieselbe. You can see that normally what was originally 1 dotted rhythm becomes 2 dotted rhythms with the brace. There's 2 dotted Gs in the written out execution. Incidentally, one can also see how G. Henley Verlag and the Roll of Honour eradicate the dotted rhythm. How it goes from 1 dotted rhythm, not to 2 dotted rhythms, but to no dotted rhythm. The beat is divided up into 4 equal parts. Count the divisions of the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. There is no dotted rhythm. None whatsoever. So here's how the brace after a dotted note would normally be introduced. And thus how its execution would look written out if Mozart had introduced the normal sign of the brace after the dotted D. Those braces after a dotted note were from the introduction of the first movement of Das Les Bouveux, by the way, or Les Adieux. But Mozart didn't want that in this case. Why not? I'd stick my neck out and say it's because it doesn't suit an adagio, Alberti-based style of accompaniment, and that has a correlation with the plopping in into the principal note as described in paragraph 23, and with the role the ornaments play in hanging the notes together, which I'll be getting to. Dieser Fall kommt oft vor, wenn das Tempo so langsam ist, dass diese Art von Noten zu langweilig werden will. Das Exempel 3. Wenn es soll durch diese Manier ausgefüllt werden, stellt einen eigentlichen Sitz des Doppelschlags vor, weil ein Triller stattdessen sowohl über der ersten Note als auch nach ihr allezeit falsch ist. Wir sehen aus der Abbildung dieses Exempels, dass der Doppelschlag sowohl nach der ersten als über der zweiten Note 4 angebracht wird. The variation that example 4 depicts, in terms of when the brace is introduced, comes very close to this new variant of brace after a dotted note. One can see it in 4 coming in after the second half of the beat, as opposed to it normally coming in at the end of the first half, like it does in example 3. And based on the langweilig in the paragraph, having the connotation of long while rather than boring, it could also be called the long while brace, if not the Mozartian brace. Or, with it being the sort of brace an Alberti-based style of accompaniment, in the spirit of good taste, demands or requires or is thankful for, it could be called the Alberti brace. We could give it to Alberti. And you can see the term brace is it's a term that just keeps on giving. And that's usually what happens when one hits upon the correct term for something. Turn is not the correct term for, or not the correct English translation for a Doppelschlag. Not at all. It got found its way in there and it's stuck, but it's incorrect. Yeah, so one could give it to Alberti. One can consider what Bach says regarding the execution of a trill over a dotted note in paragraph 14 from the chapter on trills, when wondering what the difference, the one note following the dot, as opposed to the two of example 4 could be. So example 4 is similar in that you're seeing a brace that comes in after the first half of the beat, so in the second half of the beat, as opposed to coming in at the end of the first half. But in example 4, you see 2 notes following the brace. So what's the difference if only 1 note follows the brace? And yeah, this paragraph 14 will explain some of that, or give a hint as to what that could be. And just the risk of burying the lead, I just want to add something extra now, to say something extra. Mozart was using existing knowledge to evolve the language of notation to indicate this new practice, a one the Alberti-based style of accompaniment made necessary or inspired. Mozart's journey was from point A to point B. We approach point B from point C, point C being our time and point B being Mozart's time, and point A, Bach's time. Going from point C to point B is not the same journey as the journey from point A to point B. If we want to undertake the same journey as Mozart, moving forward and not going in reverse, and see the change, the evolution through Mozart's eyes, we too have to go from point A to point B. The impression one gets when approaching and entering a building through its front entrance can greatly differ from the impression one gets if one were to only ever approach and enter it from behind. Much of the grandeur or splendour is reserved for its front, for example. If we're constantly entering those buildings from behind the building, we miss out on the wow effect when you enter from the front, because all the, So, the execution of a trill over a dotted note can be considered when wondering what difference the one note following the dot, as opposed to the 2 of example 4, with regard to this new variant of brace, could be. Punktierte Noten, worauf eine Kürze im Hinaufgehen folgt, leiden auch Triller mit dem Nachschlage, E. Anstatt dass sonsten die letzte Note von dem Nachschlage allezeit in der größten Geschwindigkeit mit der folgenden verbunden wird, F. So geschieht dieses bei punktierten Noten nicht, weil ein ganz kleiner Raum zwischen der letzten Note des Nachschlags und der folgenden bleiben muss, G. Dieser Raum muss nur so viel betragen, dass man kaum hören kann, dass der Nachschlag und die folgende Note 2 abgesonderte Dinge sind. Da dieser Raum mit der Zeitmasse ein Verhältnis hat, so ist die bei G befindliche Ausführung, alwo die Schwänzung der letzten Note des Nachschlags diesen Raum andeutet, nur so ungefähr abgebildet. The principle of this, of the space between the last note of the afterstroke, so the turn at the end of the trill, and the following note, together with the nature of the brace as we saw described in paragraph 20, can be directly applied to the relationship between the last note of the long while brace, this Mozartian brace or Alberti brace, and the E flat. Es rührt dieses von dem Vortrage der punktierten Noten, wovon in den letzten Hauptstücke gehandelt werden wird, her. Vermöge dessen, die auf die Punkte folgenden Kürzen, allezeit kürzer als die Schreibart erfordert, abgefertigt werden. This is applicable to how the following E flat is played when the ornament has been introduced and executed correctly. and it is something that Bach explains in full, and which I've looked at in past videos, and which I'll be fully covering in future videos. So, if you don't want to miss that, subscribe. And now comes the never before seen instruction, specific to this piece, from Mozart himself, on how the ornament is to be performed. Just like Bach does throughout his Versuch, like he does in example 2, where he shows how the ornamented figure appears in the score, and then shows its distribution by writing the ornament out in big notes and dividing them up in the bar. Mozart does the exact same with his ornament, so we can see conclusively exactly where it is meant to come in. It is Mozart's provision of this that should have made his decided upon indication of the ornament foolproof, especially for the experts and the outstanding individuals of the Roll of Honour. In bar 26 of the manuscript, the autograph score, the ornament appears so, just like it does in bar 1, and more so just like it does in bar 2. But in the first edition, Mozart has specifically indicated its distribution by writing the ornament out in big notes and dividing them up in the bar, exactly the way Bach does it. You can see the first note of the brace, the F, coming in after the third left-hand 16th note, the G flat. The only difference is that instead of the continuation being one note, an F in this case, the continuation is two notes that lead into the ascending chromatic run, which one could include in the second class of ornaments Bach talks about. The brace, trills, mordents, etc. belong to the first class of ornament, and this chromatic run to the second class. Die Manieren lassen sich sehr wohl in zwei Klassen abteilen. Zu der ersten rechne ich diejenigen, welche man teils durch gewisse angenommene Kennzeichen, teils durch wenige kleine Nötchen anzudeuten pflegt. Zu der anderen können die übrigen gehören, welche keine Zeichen haben und aus vielen kurzen Noten bestehen. Da die letzte Art von Manieren von dem Geschmack in der Musik besonders abhängt und folglich der Veränderung gar zu sehr unterworfen ist, da man sie bei den Klaviersachen mehrenteils angedeutet antrifft, und da man sie allenfalls bei der hinlänglichen Anzahl der übrigen missen kann, so werde ich nur etwas Weniges am Ende bei Gelegenheit der Formaten davon anführen. Im Übrigen aber bloß mit denen aus der ersten Klasse zu tun haben, indem sie mehrenteils schon von langen Zeiten her gleichsam zum Wesen des Klavierspielens gehört haben und ohne Zweifel allezeit Mode bleiben werden. This brings us into the realm of good taste, des guten Geschmacks. Firstly though, Mozart's writing out of the ornament can be compared to Bach's example 4 from paragraph 24. You'll see that the first note of each ornament only comes in after the first half of the beat, as opposed to coming in at the end of the first half of the beat, like the brace does in example 3. So in that K332 movement and in example 4, the braces are coming in later. This is the new variant of brace. The following is going to show how G. Henley Verlag, or the Roll of Honour's misrepresentation of it, violates the principles of good taste. And there is a lot surrounding this that can be considered regarding the psychology of the cage and how it substantiates what I've said about nothing existing there. Incidentally, I called it never before seen instruction. I never said regarding the roll of honour that it hasn't been staring them in the face their entire careers. The countless times they'll have encountered it in masterclasses, or taught it in lessons, or practiced, performed and recorded it themselves, or given lectures about it, or tutorials on it, seminars, analysis of it, or adjudicated it for competitions and exams, or reviewed it for magazines or periodicals. My framing of this instruction is accurate. Those both alive and dead, have never seen this as instruction from Mozart on how the ornament is to be played. They have never seen this as the ornament, and their failure to do so came at the cost of good taste. And how can that happen, you might ask? Well, it's like finding something on the floor and only realizing what it is after you've found out what it belongs to. So you can find a little plastic something on the floor and you look at it and you think, what is that? What is that? And then it's only when you realize, like, the volume knob of the radio or the foot of some button of some appliance is missing, you realize, oh yeah, that's the dial of that appliance. That's what this thing is. But before that, you were looking at it and you thought, what is that? So, and that's why they were looking at it the entire time. They never found out what it belongs to. So they were never able to realize what it was. Plus, there's quite a fuss made about good taste and what that is. This'll help them out on that matter. In paragraph 29 from the chapter on the brace, Bach introduced a 3-note stepwise descending sequence and illustrated how it can be filled out and decorated with a glancing brace. Wenn in langsamer Zeitmasse 3 Noten heruntersteigen, so entsteht vor der mittelsten ein Vorschlag, worauf über solcher der prallende Doppelschlag eintritt, welchen ein abermaliger Vorschlag vor der letzten Note noch folgt. Bach then explains what the various embellishments do, the reason for being there. And it's the reason for the last appoggiatura of the sequence that we're paying special attention to. Der erste Vorschlag ist etwas Gewöhnliches bei langsamen Noten, indem sie gut ausfüllt. Außerdem aber war hier nötig, den prallenden Doppelschlag bequem und nicht eher anzubringen, als bis die Hälfte der Note, worüber sich befindet, vorbei war, welche Hälfte just ausfüllt. Der letzte Vorschlag dient nicht nur zur Verkürzung der letzten langen Note, damit sie, wegen ihrer Dauer, ein Verhältnis mit der vorigen bekomme. So that was the part to remember. Sondern ist auch nötig wegen der Natur des Doppelschlages, welcher, wie der ihm ähnliche Triller mit dem Nachschlage, sich gerne in die Höhe neigt. You can check that movement, Mozart's movement, to see if that's true. When Bach says about the last appoggiatura that one of the reasons for it being there is that it serves to shorten the last long note, the B, so that it becomes proportional to the previous note in terms of its duration. That is a question of good taste, of balance, and something Bach, in his book, has referred to on more occasions than just this one here. And it'll be something he'll have been constantly mindful of while composing. Since the length of the preceding C was halved by the D appoggiatura, good taste calls for the following B to be halved by its D appoggiatura. Take bar 26. By performing the brace that comes in after the A natural at the second half of the bar, according to the true way to play the piano, it gives that A natural a proportionate relationship to the E flat at the start of that bar, which is in keeping with the principles of good taste. Is there any indication in all his output that, like Bach, Mozart could have been mindful of such things while composing? Do we even need to look elsewhere in his body of work for the answer? Why did Mozart introduce a brace in that last bit of the phrase? It's the one and only occasion in that movement where Mozart added a brace to that bit of the phrase. Even though it occurred several times before that, you can check the score. In no other place in that part of that last bit of each phrase did he add a brace. It's only in this one. Mozart added the brace in order for the A natural to have a proportionate relationship in terms of its length with the preceding E flat. Dieser Fall kommt oft vor, wenn das Tempo so langsam ist, dass diese Art von Noten zu langweilig werden will. And in terms of the Schärfe, the sharpness of the brace, having a proportionate relationship with the Schärfe of the run. So, evidence Mozart was mindful of the balance. Had he not given it any thought, then that part of the phrase, just like he has it every other time it occurs, wouldn't have gotten a brace. The fact that this part of the phrase, as the one and only time, gets special treatment shows Mozart was mindful of the balance. He was mindful of good taste. The E flat's corresponding note in the bar before that, for example, in bar 25, the B flat, also maintains a proportionate relationship with it. And about 25% of the content of the entire movement maintains a proportionate relationship with that E flat of bar 26 when it's performed properly. Alle Manieren erfordern eine proportionierte Verhältnis mit der Geltung der Note, mit der Zeitmaße und mit dem Inhalte des Stückes. The E flat of bar 26 belongs to the content of the piece. So that means all ornaments and their introduction have to have a proportionate relationship with that content. Basically, to put it simply, the braces performed after the E flat in bar 26, which, as can be seen in the autograph score, is actually a dotted E flat, like it is after all the other dotted notes in the movement. It's just that this time round, instead of it being followed by the one note, It's followed by 2 notes, out of which springs a chromatic run. That second class of embellishment. Balance, consistency, flow, character, they've all been maintained. With G. Henley Verlag and the Roll of Honour's incorrect way of playing it, there is no proportionate relationship between that E flat and the dotted notes coming either before or after it. The run feels arbitrary, like a foreign body incongruent with everything around it, shoehorned in there. It makes true what Bach said in paragraph 10 of his introduction regarding the ill-timed runs of the Roll of Honour representatives from his day. Bei dieser Steife der linken Hand sucht der Meister es bei der rechten wieder einzubringen, indem seine Schüler besonders die Adagio und rührendsten Stellen dem guten Geschmack zu noch mehrerem Ekel aufs reichlichste mit lieblichen Trillerchen verbrämen lehret. Oft wird mit alten Schulmeistermanieren, you can count the Roll of Honour's brace as one of them, oft mit herausgestolperten und zur Unzeit angebrochten Laufern, wobei die Finger zuweilen den Koller zu kriegen scheinen, abgewechselt. G. Henley Verlag and the Roll of Honour, in having, over generations, 25% of the movement performed incorrectly, and in themselves performing 25% of the movement incorrectly, turn Mozart's run into one of those ill-timed runs the cage professors of Bach's time were so fond of inflicting on their students. With their old schoolmaster brace, the Roll of Honour set up and establish a certain rhythm throughout the movement, and then they come in with a run, a decoration of the line that bears no relationship whatsoever with the rhythm they've been establishing of that same line. And that run comes in then to the same effect Bach describes. The fingers look like they are out of nowhere flying off in a tantrum or a rage. And then, after the run, that floundering, inexplicable outburst, they're expected to revert back to the original rhythm. A rhythm that bears no proportionate relationship whatsoever to the preceding E flat. Because the nature of that E flat clashes with the entire movement as they're playing it. There is not one single other note in that movement as they play it that bears that same length. It's the odd one out completely. And it's the 25% the Roll of Honour get wrong that makes it the odd one out. So they are meant to revert back to that clashing rhythm as if nothing happened. Is that not what people in denial try to do? Under those circumstances, there is no successful performance of that run and that which follows it possible. The best the Roll of Honour have been able to do is that they get through it by playing all the notes and not messing up. But they've always been hanging on by the skin of their teeth. They've never been able to hide the struggle, the stumbling and the fumbling till the end of the phrase. And as a result, it has never sounded natural, because it is not natural. In other words, they wear their complete ignorance of good taste on their sleeve. And I use ignorance there in the accurate, in its actual meaning. Can't think of a better word. They do have a complete ignorance of good taste, and they're wearing that on their sleeve. It's plain as day for anybody who understands the matter of taste to see. This is what the mediocrity of the cage has done to that piece. And those in the cage who served the cage have been perfectly comfortable attributing that blatant display of mediocrity to Mozart. The E flat is the odd note out, and it is the 25% of the movement the Roll of Honour play incorrectly that makes the E flat the odd one out. The E flat is foolproof. The other 25% isn't foolproof. That's why the fool has to and will play the E flat as it's written, but will never figure out what that means for the rest of the movement, or that it even bears a relationship to the rest of the movement. Despite all the evidence Mozart has provided that he may quite possibly be a genius. When performing that ornament according to the true way to play the piano, the length of that E flat matches the length of every other dotted note in that movement that has been given a brace. And then there's the psychology, the mindset of the Roll of Honour. How many of them have forgiven Mozart this indiscretion? Instead of thinking, hold on, there's no way Mozart could display such an obvious lack of taste. We must be doing something wrong. They projected their own mediocrity, the mediocrity of the cage, onto Mozart, just like they did it with Beethoven in the Das Leben wohl. And the power of the cage is so that it's been going on for generations and shows no sign of stopping. Such a sense of proportion and balance belong to the basics of good taste. They have embraced the idea that Mozart could lack such basics with glee, with a sense of superiority, with a sense of magnanimity. That is the extent of their projection. If that was a film, what we'd see in bar 26 would be a massive, major plot hole, impossible to overlook and probably the stuff of memes. It'd be like Spider-Man, still in possession of all his superpowers, not being able to climb a stair. Consider Mozart's command of balance. Consider the heights of sophistication that such a command was able to take him. And in light of that, consider the caricature the Roll of Honour have created in their own image and placed before the one true Mozart for all to worship and obey. And I can add to that, to dote upon. Because I don't think any composer's more doted upon than Mozart. Maybe Schumann. They'll have explained to their young students, because young students will have a gut reaction to how bad that run sounds and feels that has not yet been corrupted. They'll explain to them that Mozart didn't understand virtuosity like we do, but it's understandable and forgivable because he was a product of his time, and that they were more backward than we are. They didn't have the likes of Liszt and Chopin. But we can forgive him because he was still a genius, and that's how big we are. Mozart is neither an artist, nor a virtuoso, nor a grown-up in their minds, nor a devastating force of nature that would leave them weeping, smashing their illusions into smithereens if he was ever to encounter them. But the ideal of a non-threatening, well-behaved piano pupil, a golden pupil, wonderful in many ways, but slightly inferior, through no fault of his own, in others. So he's someone who, despite his many qualities, still could stand to benefit from the wisdom and glory of the Roll of Honour's teaching, that teaching that you have the privilege of experiencing. So the perfect idol, both superior and inferior, bigger than Lilliputians, but smaller than Lilliputians at the same time, like their God is both bigger and smaller than they are. You know, when you think of the being or the entity, whatever it is responsible for existence, when confronted with whoever or whatever that is responsible for the universe, for existence, there's not a single Lilliputian that wouldn't be able to put God on the spot or tell him a thing or two. And you know, that's the Lilliput mind, and you know, it's natural. There's a natural element to it, but it's not something to indulge in. It's as well something that can be observed and taught. Well, okay, I have a tendency to do that. Let me think. Let me consider how big something might be and how small I might be, and approach it from that angle, and then see what can I discover, how can I improve. And in the case of Mozart, what you can do is you can figure out the correct way to play the piece. If you're not so ready to have this Lilliput idea that you're so big and Mozart is so small. Da also die Manieren, nebst der Art sie zu gebrauchen, ein ansehnliches zum feinen Geschmacke beitragen. So, Roll of Honour, in the light of what you've seen, is that ringing any bells? The true mark of expertise lies in being able to recognize the correct answer when it is being laid out before you. It's like the antique expert. It's not the work of art behind the velvet rope with all the security guards in the art gallery that that their expertise requires them to recognize. It's when it happens, on a normal video on YouTube or in some attic or cellar somewhere full of cobwebs and all. That's when the expertise is called upon to recognize, hold on, this is a masterpiece. So, da also die Manieren nebst der Art sie zu gebrauchen ein ansehnliches zum feinen Geschmacke beitragen. So muss man weder zu veränderlich sein und den Augenblick jede neue Manier, es mag sie vorbringen, wer nur will. Who introduced the incorrect Roll of Honour version? Because the Roll of Honour's defence, if they are to refute my claim and save face, among many other things, are going to have to name their sources. Anonymous sources are not going to cut the mustard. And they won't be able to use Bach and Mozart as their sources because Bach and Mozart don't agree with them. Bach and Mozart are not on their side. They're on my side. Und den Augenblick jede neue Manier, es mag sie vorbringen, wer nur will, ohne weitere Untersuchung annehmen. With glee, they embrace that incorrect version. It's the 25% they get wrong that makes that E flat as content of the piece, the odd one out, and yet they don't question it. noch auch zu viel Vorurteil für sich und seinen Geschmack besitzen, aus Eigensinn gar nichts Fremdes annehmen zu wollen. My claim is the dirty foreign one they won't want to accept, and the one they'll want to keep from you. And I'm dependent on, your willingness to give support to this cause. I can only put the video out there, but it would be your likes or comments or subscriptions they'll only be too happy to ignore this. They'll only be too happy not to find themselves in a position where they have to respond, where they have to, they can make life difficult for themselves and try and refute my claim, try and debunk it and come up with a better argument. And I don't rule that out. If they can come up with a better argument, let them come up. Then we'll all benefit from that. But if they're not forced to, they're only too happy that this slips into oblivion, that this never gets seen, and they get away with it, and they can just keep the status quo. Freilich gehört allezeit eine scharfe Prüfung vorher, ehe man sich etwas Fremdes zueignet. All I'm asking is that they recount the vigorous testing they undertook before embracing their way of playing the brace. Because that's all I'm doing here. That's what you're getting a hint of the vigorous testing I did before coming out with my claim. Und es ist möglich, dass mit der Zeit durch eingeführte unnatürliche Neuerungen, like the incorrect way of playing Mozart's brace, der gute Geschmack ebenso rar werden kann als die Wissenschaft. Should I give that time to sink in? Bach was bang on with that prediction, which is tragic given what that means. The role of honor should be taking it to heart, and at the same time be trying to figure out the true meaning of repentance. But they won't if they don't have to. Humility is one of the first of the many casualties of the cage. Nothing exists in the cage. Here's more on the matter of taste. When performing that brace after the A natural in bar 26, so when performing that brace after the A natural, the incorrect way G Henley Verlag and the roll of honor say it is meant to be played, what you have is, after the struck bare fifth, which is created by the D in the left hand and the A natural in the right hand, is both the left and right hand ascending to their respective B flats, creating a hidden parallel octave in the singing line. So a bare fifth immediately followed by a hidden parallel octave, and then the A of the ornament coming in with the left hand F, creating an F major harmony after having created a G minor harmony with the three triplet notes beforehand, thereby destroying the B flat harmony and the whole point or essence of the A natural appoggiatura, only to finish off that beat with the next parallel octave in the singing line. It is a train wreck when it comes to good taste. Is that the standard of Mozart? The roll of honor seem only too happy to think so. But if you play it the correct way, none of those mistakes are present. Those are the mistakes the roll of honour are inflicting on their countless victims. All things that sound terrible, that contaminate the phrase, while holding their victims and their victims playing responsible for its terrible sound, sending them to the metronome, sentencing them to the next long bout of cage activity, of ironic punishment. Because when something is flawed, the more perfect you play it, the more perfect you're going to bring out those flaws. Thus, the worse it's going to sound. So it's an ironic punishment. The better you do it, the worse it sounds. And what happens when you hear it sounding so bad? You go back and you try even harder and harder and harder. And it's like you're polishing this diamond, but it's not a diamond you're polishing. It's a turd. Knowledge and good taste don't exist in the cage. It's sad, but it's true. Think of who I'm talking to, who I'm going up against here. I'm going up against the very top of the classical music sector. Man muss also ebenfalls bei Anbringung der Vorschläge, wie überhaupt bei allen Manieren, der Reinigkeit des Satzes keinen Tort tun. The last aspect I'll be addressing is the role the brace plays in hanging the notes together. In paragraph 20 from the chapter on ornaments in general, Bach says, Der Endzweck aller Manieren hauptsächlich dahin gerichtet sein muss, die Noten zusammenzuhängen. If we look at that opening phrase, that brace is there to hang the D, the note struck on the second beat of that bar, to the following E flat, which itself is a passing note, which in turn is also connecting that D struck at the beginning of the second beat to the note following it. But instead of the principal note, the F, being the one to follow, which would become tiresome because of the length it would have been, there is an appoggiatura repeating the preceding note, the E flat, only it's raised a semitone or naturalized. And the appoggiatura's function, besides shortening the F and filling the ear, is to hang the F not just to the preceding D, but as well to the following C, in that the F, as a result, instead of it being a full quarter note or crotchet in length, goes straight to the C. One could use that bar 1 as an example to accompany paragraph 1 from the chapter on appoggiaturas. Sie verbessern sowohl die Melodie als auch die Harmonie. Im ersten Falle erregen sie eine Gefälligkeit, indem sie die Noten gut zusammenhängen. Indem sie die Noten, welche wegen ihrer Länge oft verdrießlich fallen könnten, verkürzen und zugleich auch das Gehör fühlen, und indem sie zuweilen den vorhergehenden Ton wiederholen. Man weiß aber aus der Erfahrung, dass überhaupt in der Musik das vernünftige Wiederholen gefällig macht. Mozart's repeat of the E is that sensible repetition. It is played forte. Had it been necessary, Mozart would have given it the same dynamic marking as he gave to the F and E flat of bar 4. Without the SFP, one wouldn't be able to know that that F at the beginning of bar 4 is meant to be treated as an appoggiatura and not a principal note. So the SFP is necessary. The E natural in bar 1, however, is an obvious appoggiatura. So the SFP goes without saying. And the correct way of performing that ornament will put the momentum in your favor for the successful performance of the appoggiatura. The principal coming into the principal note, the D and the E flat, you're light on your feet, which puts you in a position to be better able to put the weight on the appoggiatura. Whereas with the incorrect way of playing it, when the D comes in with a plod, the E flat comes in with a plod, how are you meant to express the appoggiatura then when you've had plod, plod, and you're going to have to either go to ridiculous lengths to express an appoggiatura, or like the temptation is, or the conflict that I'll have recording the examples for that, is just playing it flat. And what does the Roll of Honour do? They play it flat because, well, I don't think they even know it's an appoggiatura. And the proper way to play that brace in its proper place, it's exactly like a hop, skip and jump in athletics. And because you have the hop and the skip with the brace and the E flat, and the jump is landing on the appoggiatura, the E natural appoggiatura, it works out perfectly. And that will revert back to when I said that the brace is the crux of the phrase. Without the brace in its proper position, you can't perform the appoggiatura correctly. And in athletics, you know, if you were to, if it was lost, the hop, skip and jump sort of category of long jump, if they were trying to recreate it, like that's what, you know, we're doing in music. We have these scores, old scores, and we're trying to recreate how it sounded. If you separate the hop from the skip and jump in athletics, that skip and jump are not going to be the correct skip and jumps. So if they're running and then they do a hop and then they run a bit more and then they do the skip and jump, first of all, it'll look ridiculous, and second of all, it won't be correct, it'll be incorrect. And it's only when the hop, skip and jump are together, you know, it's the Newton thing. The one facilitates the other, and the markings, the dynamic, the shape of the phrase, the dynamic mark, they only make sense when all the elements are in their proper places. If you're playing that brace incorrectly, you are, you know, you're following it like it's dogma. Then the expression marks or anything, you're putting a staccato or whatever it is in there just because it says, and you're forcing it in there artificially. It's not, you know, it's not occurring naturally out of the sequence of events. Ferner lernen wir aus dieser Abbildung zugleich ihren Vortrag, in dem alle Vorschläge stärker als die folgende Note samt ihren Zieraten angeschlagen und an diese gezogen werden. Es mag nun der Bogen dabei stehen oder nicht. Mozart added the bow. Diese beiden Vorsichten sind dem Endzwecke der Vorschläge gemäß, als wodurch die Noten zusammengehängt werden sollen. Man muss sie also so lange, bis sie von der folgenden Note abgelöst werden, aushalten, damit sie gut binden. Mozart, in his team, uses ornamentation to bring about that the D is hung ultimately to the C. And what effect does the brace have when it is in close proximity to the E natural appoggiatura, as it is with the proper way to play the ornament, and when it has its schärfe, its sharpness, so when it's not performed too slowly? It serves to offset the danger Bach mentions in paragraph 18 from the chapter on appoggiaturas. Alle diese Vorschläge, nebst ihren Abzügen, wenn sie zumal häufig vorkommen, tun besonders bei sehr affektuosen Stellen gut, indem der letztere oft mit einem Pianissimo gleichsam verluscht. Figur 14. Bei anderen Gelegenheiten aber würden sie den Gesang zu matt machen, wenn sie nicht als den entweder die Vorläufer von lebhafteren Manieren wären, welche die folgende Note bekommen, oder selbst noch einen Zusatz von anderen Zieraten annehmen. In Mozart's case, the livelier ornament, which prevents the singing being made too matte by the appoggiatura, comes not with the appoggiatura, but directly before it. That is, of course, when performing it according to the true way to play the piano. Playing it the cage way, the roll of honor way, the slowness of the ornament together with its premature introduction, the separating of it from the E flat, and the time that passes between it and the following appoggiatura, do nothing to prevent the pitfall of the singing becoming too matte or dull. They plod, and then the plods get heavier and more tiresome, more monotonous. The first D is too short with the incorrect way of playing it. It's not held or allowed to sound long enough. And the last D of the brace plopping in with the third left-hand D overshadows or eclipses that first D. And they are the two factors that cause us to forget about that first D entirely. So instead of the brace playing its part in hanging the D to the following C, it has already gone and separated it from the directly ensuing E flat. Because that's the influence the Alberti style bass accompaniment has on the singing line and its ornamentation, even when the normal brace after the dot is done properly. And why Mozart had to come up with a new variant of brace following a dotted note. The D is too short, we forget. And it's plopping in that uncouth way with the third left hand 16th note puts it out of our mind entirely. So the ornament's role in hanging the notes together is totally sabotaged. We have the B flat D and C as the skeleton frame of that phrase. In the next bar, bar 2, so that's not bar 4 I mean, because the next bar after bar 1, bar 2 bars would be bar 4, but I mean actually bar 2. So in the next bar, bar 2, the E flat is hung onto the G by the brace, which in turn, via the combined effect of the brace and appoggiatura, is ultimately hung onto the F. So we have E flat, G and F as the skeleton of the next part of that opening theme. And then the skeleton goes from G in bar 3 to F, to E flat in bar 4, to D, and finally to C, whereby the entry of each skeletal note or principal note, excluding the G, has been delayed by appoggiaturas. That C ends the opening section. I don't know if you can see it, but what I see there is an incredible level of sophistication from Mozart. And so, in light of that, I'm meant to then believe that Mozart wasn't in a position to comprehend the very basics of good taste with the E flat, the chromatic run, and the following A natural of bar 26. It's only in the cage can one swallow such a brick. Is there anything, Carl, you want to add? Ja. Es ist etwas Besonderes, dass durch eine unrechte Spielart gemeiniglich die besten und sangbarsten Stellen müssen verdorben werden. Die meisten Fehler kommen bei langsamen und gezogenen Noten vor. Man will sie der Vergessenheit durch Triller entreißen. Das verwöhnte Ohr will beständig in einer gleichen Empfindung erhalten sein. Es empfindet nicht anders als durch ein Geräusche. Man sieht hieraus, dass diejenigen, welche diesen Fehler begehen, weder singend denken können, noch jeder Note ihren Druck und ihre Unterhaltung zu geben wissen. Sowohl auf dem Klavichorde als auf dem Flügel singen die Noten nach, wenn man sie nicht zu kurz abfertigt. Bach is talking here about your champions, the roll of honor. They haven't the patience to let the D sound. They're lost if they haven't any noise to make, so they come in early with their turn. And as a result, their ornament fails to do any of that which Bach has said ornaments do. Sie hängen die Noten zusammen. Sie beleben sie. Sie geben ihnen, wenn es nötig ist, einen besonderen Nachdruck und Gewicht. Sie machen sie gefällig und erwecken folglich eine besondere Aufmerksamkeit. Sie helfen ihren Inhalt erklären. What this does, this video, the argument, the answer, is it sheds some of the light of the world of music onto the darkness of the cage, giving those in it a brief opportunity to see their surroundings, to see the cage and all its ravages, that desperately wants to remain hidden in that shroud of darkness, together with those that serve the cage. See it's real. And to realize what it is I'm offering, which is a chance to escape that cage. The world of music is real, and none that enter will be denied its gifts. You just have to want it. By rights, this should be embraced and celebrated as a course correction that has long been overdue. It warrants a response from the classical music establishment with their claims of excellence. One could think of this like one does a petition, that if it were to get enough signatures, enough support, enough canvassing, it'd be something they'd have to address. Classical music with I mean, this is just one aspect that the Roll of Honor get wrong of the state they've brought it in, but and it heralds a period of rediscovering the works of Mozart, of gaining some space, some room to maneuver in the field of classical music, which has effectively painted itself into a corner. You know, if somebody was to take this as a basis for content on their channel, on videos of their own, what could be talked about is the the implications, what that means for, you know, the music, the playing the music, how it's understood, discovering the true voice in Mozart, and the incorrect way of playing it, all those things like the bad taste, that lack of balance, that is preventing people from the get-go. It's sabotaging their chances of being able to play the piece. You know, you're expected to bring in a staccato or a slur or an accent somewhere where you're denied, where the hop has been removed from the skip and jump, and then and the accent comes naturally from the hop and skip, then comes the jump. And you can see how when if you tell a young student, if you remove the hop and then tell them to perform the jump as it's meant to be performed, then it's impossible to do it. It'd be impossible for Mozart to do it. It would be impossible for Liszt to do it. And it's completely unfair. They are wasting the time of those students. They're wasting their talent. They're wasting their potential because they're feeding them all the wrong information, and they're just putting them in the cage, and they can, instead of actually discovering the fruits of the world of music, they have them toiling in the cage in misery. The only satisfaction you can get is the same sort of satisfaction you get if you just spend all day cleaning or something. And that might be good in terms of you feel like you've absolved yourself for your sins. But it is ultimately, once the tired feeling, once you're rested, the emptiness will come back. It doesn't feed the soul. But I guess that's the key to, it's all about power and control. And unfortunately, they have no qualms about denying you the truth, denying you the correct answer. But think of, if you're sending your children to piano lessons, think of your friends who would love to be able to play the piano. Think of yourself who will have fallen victim. And let's say you're not serving the cage. And let's say you are serving the cage, but you're unwittingly serving the cage. And let's say you'd love it if your students, you know, very often this movement will be, I'd say the majority of the time, performed by females, because I think boys will, you know, it's just too, you know, it's not cool. But when it's performed, I never address this kind of elephant in the room as I see it, but as far as I'm concerned, the correct way of playing it is much, much better than the incorrect way of playing it. And it's cool. It shows Mozart the virtuoso. And you can hear it. I'll link it. And in my channel, there'll be on the playlists, there'll be that entire sonata if you want to hear the entire sonata as it's meant to be performed. And what you'll hear there is different to how you'll hear it anywhere else. So that can be studied. And don't let you're going to have to listen past the piano. Listen to the voice leading, the soprano, bass and middle voices. Listen to the length of the notes, and then you'll start to notice the articulation. Feel the harmonic tension. Listen out for the phrase lengths, the true lengths of the phrases. They are all too short. The Roll of Honor all play them too short. And you can hear in that movement the overall in that second movement, and the difference playing the ornament correctly makes. And it's not the only thing the Roll of Honor get wrong in that movement. And if you're to study my demonstration of the correct way to play the piano, you will see all the other places the Roll of Honor play incorrectly. But imagine you're teaching and your student is enthusiastic, instead of it being a punishment. And imagine they actually would like to play it for their friends, instead of being embarrassed by it and hiding it because it's too, like, because it sounds too bad. They'll be displaying their prowess when they can deliver the schärfe, the sharpness, something that's all but eradicated in the cage. So there's plenty to talk about in terms of the implications, because this has a major impact. This is more impactful than a new work discovered by Mozart, because this changes our understanding of the Mozartian brace. The Mozartian brace has not been understood, identified, or explained. Here, this is the premiere. This is where it's happened. And it affects 25% of that movement. And how much, and it could affect 25% of Mozart's entire, keyboard output, just to restrict it to that, but it'll affect other areas too, other works of his. It could, and like Newton's third law, it'll affect what comes before and after it, because as soon as you get one piece in place, it'll start to put the pieces around it in place too, and you'll start to realize, oh yeah, this is how this next bit's meant to be played. Once the hop and skip are there where they're meant to come, then you discover the jump for the very first time. So if any of that was done, this could, they would be in, their best option is to acknowledge this and celebrate it as an important course correction, significant. If they don't want to, they should have to. They've been pocketing your money long enough, and they don't have to explain anything, because like I said, you can always think of, if you've gone through the system like I have, think of what they've already told you, and you'll see there is no argument for their way of doing it. It's just the correct way, because it's assumed to be the correct way and nobody challenges it. But have them come up with an argument, have them name their sources, have them refute everything, because maybe their level of insight is so far beyond mine, and I should be upset about, let's say that is the case, which I know it's not. I mean, they're only parrots. They are just telling you what they were told themselves, and who the real culprit is, they haven't got a clue anymore. It's just going on, and every generation gets a little bit worse than the last, till we're at the point where a major reform is due, because it's gotten so bad and so pathetic, and it's something that one can't like. Only with all the sort of mind games to convince yourself. There's that saying, I don't know much about art, but I know what I like. I read in Sue Townsend with her Adrian Mole things, diary series, Adrian Mole saying when he was older, I know a lot about art, but I don't know what I like. And that's what happens. That's what the stage you're at. The more you hear that misinformation from the Roll of Honor, the less you're in connection with your instincts. With the correct answer here, the best way is listen to it when it's done properly. It's infinitely better. You can talk a lot. That's as well content for, you can talk just what difference it makes, how much better it sounds, how much it's you go, yeah, I get it. That's why Mozart was great. That's why he was a virtuoso. Kissin, I don't think Kissin would play this piece as it's performed incorrectly in a concert, because Kissin has a good sense of what his audience wants and what delivers a certain standard of virtuosity. He wouldn't deliver this because he wouldn't play that, I'm guessing, because it would sound too amateurish, too much like a piano student, which isn't a good look for Kissin. But if he was to play it correctly, as you can see it performed correctly with my demonstration of the true way to play the piano, he'd definitely be playing that in a concert because it sounds virtuosic. You get the sense of Mozart as the virtuoso, Mozart as the one who had that singing thinking perfected. None of that is present as it's currently being performed incorrectly, and I have supported my claim, and I haven't covered everything because of time constraints and all that, but let them come up with their argument, let them back it up, and then decide who has the stronger argument, who has the more valid points, who has the better sources, and which version passes the smell test. So I'd appreciate any support, and it just has to be a like or a comment, or it'd be great. I'd love to see it happen. I'd love to see them respond. Thanks. Bye.